And this is a Fox News alert. We are nearing the midnight hour, at which time the federal government will effectively shut down, and no deal has emerged between Republicans and Democrats. By the way, that's 2 hours and 17 minutes from right now. But negotiations, they're still ongoing, and disagreements over the amount of spending cuts, as well as policy issues like the funding of Planned Parenthood, have prevented Republicans and Democrats from coming together to pass a budget measure. And joining me now live from Capitol Hill, Republican Congressman Jeb Hensarling of Texas, who just left Speaker Boehner's office, and Democratic Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez of California. Thank you both for being here. Congressman, let me start with you. You just came out of the Speaker's office. As I understand it, negotiations have been ongoing. What's the very latest?
Well, Sean, the Speaker looked me in the eye as of 10 minutes ago and said there is still no agreement. I mean, the Speaker is still fighting for the highest savings that we can get. I mean, House Republicans put on the floor 7 weeks ago a bill that would keep the government open, but actually put us on a trajectory to start spending less after the nation's first $1 trillion deficit, second $1 trillion deficit, and third $1 trillion deficit. And what the Democrats call this abusive and draconian budget still funds the government at 98% of last year's level. You know, at some point, you got to quit spending money you don't have. So there's no agreement at the moment. We remain optimistic that we can keep the government open, but Democrats have had almost 7 weeks to do something they still haven't acted.
Well, I think it's longer than 7 weeks. Congresswoman, welcome back. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Sean. Nice to be back on the show.
We appreciate it. And all right, you were in the last Congress. You're a Democrat. Your party had significant majorities in the House and the Senate. You had a Democratic president. This budget should have been passed before October 1st of last year. It wasn't passed. Wasn't passed after the election in November. Wasn't passed in December. It's now 6 months later. Did your party fail? Was it a dereliction of duty by not doing your job and passing the budget?
Well, I think we worked very hard at it. The problem was we really didn't have a supermajority in the Senate. You remember that Senator Kennedy died, and so we didn't have that, and we had to entice Republicans, and there was an election, and Republicans didn't want to come along, so we had to put that off, and now we're here, and we're in this particular situation.
You're going a long way.
And I agree that we all want to bring down spending. It's just where we want to make those cuts. For example, I would say that we need to get out of Iraq and Afghanistan. That's $3 billion a week.
Well, tell President Obama that.
$3 billion. I do, and you know that I do. I've told him that. I've talked to my colleagues. But the Republicans actually have an increase in the defense budget, even though 10 years now and more, and we've really got nowhere. We're going to get nothing out of this money spending that we've done in Iraq and Afghanistan.
With Senator Paul, I just played the cut of Louise Slaughter. The GOP in Washington, this was said earlier today, want to kill women. I just played Harry Reid. Republicans don't want women to get cancer screenings. Republicans don't want clean air to breathe. Nancy Pelosi says Republicans don't want 6 million seniors to eat. And here's what Eleanor Norton had to say as well today.
This is the functional equivalent of bombing innocent civilians. It's time that the District of Columbia told the Congress to go straight to hell. These Republicans are saying, you don't count as American citizens. Indeed, you raise some money, hey, it's ours. We will decide how you spend your money, and we will close you down if you don't like it. If that doesn't bring you out in the streets, I don't know what will.
Republicans want to kill women. This is like bombing innocent civilians. Republicans don't want women to get cancer screenings. Congresswoman, will you condemn the rhetoric? The president did call for a new age of civility. Is that over the top in your mind?
Well, I'm sure that I would never say some of those comments, to tell you the truth.
Is it over the top?
It's at least one of those might be.
Just one of them.
But
maybe killing women.
At least I said at least one.
At least
what
one.
I'm saying is that there's just priority differences. I mean, we want to ensure that public schools are better, not worse, in America. Women pay more for their health care if they can get health care. Right. We want to help women to actually get the health care they need. So it's just a difference in priority. On the other side, they want to fund more war.
Hensley. Congressman, let me ask you this. This budget's $3.6 trillion. Our budget deficit that the Democrats, that we now project, is $1.65 trillion. Little under by the end of this fiscal year, Obama will have accumulated nearly $5 trillion in debt. How is $61 billion, you know, here we are on the verge, 2 hours and 42 minutes away from shutting down the government over $61 billion of a $3.6 trillion budget. How did we get here?
Well, you know, Sean, you're right. It's almost Alice in Wonderland kind of quality here. I mean, we have seen the highest levels of debt that we have seen since World War II. We are on the path to national bankruptcy. And again, on the one hand, if we achieve savings in this continuing resolution, it'll be historic. It'll be the largest since World War II. But on the other hand, as you point out, relative to the size of the problem, it's not even a rounding error. You know, we're just starting to turn that battleship. But if we want to create jobs for the American people, job creators know that massive quantities of debt will lead to massive quantities of tax increases, which leads to massive quantities of unemployment. That's why we still have millions and millions of our fellow countrymen unemployed. You got to quit spending money you don't have.
That's right.
Families are tightening their belt. They expect the government to tighten theirs as well.
That's right, especially money that we're spending overseas, money that we're spending in Iraq. We're building schools for Afghan children. Meanwhile, our schools here deteriorate. I mean, we really need to sit down and talk about where the big money is that we're spending, and it's not on the domestic front.
Well, it actually is. Entitlements are about to go bankrupt. Social Security,
not on
Medicare,
the discretionary side, Sean.
Well,
not on the discretionary side.
But that's a small portion of the budget.
Almost 60% of the discretionary monies go
it's
to
insignificant
the
when you really look at the overall spending. But, Congresswoman, I'm just curious. Of the three statements that you thought one was extreme, was it that the Republicans want to kill women, Republicans are like bombing innocent civilians, or Republicans don't want women to get cancer screenings? Which one was over the top? Because you said only one was.
I said at least one was, and I'm really not going to get in trouble with my colleagues and single somebody out.
Yeah, they might get mad.
But again, we just need to really talk about priorities.
Yeah,
I think we should be looking at the Bowles-Simpson report, and I think we should really be sitting down at the table and looking at this. And that's not the president's role. That is legislative. That is policy. That is what the Congress does.
The president rejected every single one of the recommendations of his own fiscal responsibility commission. I served on it. I know.
It was a bipartisan commission. Why didn't you guys bring that up? Why didn't you?
We have it in our budget, and the president has none of it.
No, you have completely different things in the Ryan budget. I have seen those two things. He doesn't want a speed bump on the road to national bankruptcy.
All right.
I have to disagree with you.
Otherwise, we agree, Sean.
I have to disagree with you.
All right. We are actually now 2 hours and 39 minutes away from a government shutdown. Thank you both for being with us. When we come back, we'll get reaction from freshman Tea Party Congresswoman Kristi Noem. We have all of that and the latest from Capitol Hill as the countdown to the shutdown continues. Can lawmakers strike a deal before time runs out? And Harry Reid expected to speak very shortly. Straight ahead. And this is a Fox News alert. We are just over 2 hours and 35 minutes away from a government shutdown, and the two parties have yet to reach an agreement that would forestall that event. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid is expected to deliver remarks on the Senate floor very soon to update the nation on the status of those negotiations. Meanwhile, Democrats continue to use the Tea Party movement as a scapegoat for the budget mess. But my next guest begs to differ. Joining us now with reaction, South Dakota freshman Tea Party candidate, Congresswoman Kristi Noem. Congresswoman, welcome back. Thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Sean. I appreciate it, too.
All right, so we got an early sneak peek, a little preview, if you will, of Chuck Schumer and the strategy of the Democrats. He was called on a conference call, didn't know journalists were looking, used the word extreme, and those very words were used today by himself and by Dick Durbin. Here's what they said.
The Tea Party's trying to push through its extreme agenda. Issues that have nothing to do with funding government. This is an extreme agenda that has nothing to do with a funding bill. The Tea Party cheers for a shutdown, and I mean that without any hyperbole. They're cheering for it literally.
This is no longer about the budget deficit, it's about bumper stickers. It's time for Speaker Boehner to acknowledge that we have an agreement. We are going to reduce the deficit for the remainder of this year, and he has to tell his Tea Party Rough Riders to put their horses in the barn.
Well, you're a well-known Tea Party candidate. What's your reaction to that?
Well, you know, it's apparent to me, and I think the entire country by now, that Harry Reid has been desperate for a shutdown. So, because the cuts that we proposed 7 weeks ago, 48 days ago almost exactly, was 2% of our budget. So, I don't think anybody would call 2% cuts to a budget extreme in some of the verbal language that he's been using. A lot of our states have had to go through a lot more than that to balance their budgets. The federal government by far has a lot of waste, a lot of duplicity, a lot of things we need to address. So to call that extreme just shows me that he's trying to politicize this, and he's doing it on the backs of our military, and he's doing it on the backs of every single family out there that's trying to make ends meet.
That's well said. You know, it's almost like the term Tea Party now is used as a pejorative. I got to be honest, I'm actually inspired. I'm energized by the fact that people are engaged, that they understand that record debt and deficit puts our country's future in jeopardy. And they're saying all these things about the Tea Party. Now, I was getting a little worried that Republicans might be caving. How important is it to you, because this is important to me, that the whole $61 billion, that Republicans be willing to shut the government down if the Democrats cannot cut $61 billion of a $3.6 trillion budget?
I think it's extremely important to me that every time that I've got a bill in front of me that cuts spending, that I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we get those to be as big a cuts as possible. You know, I'm a farmer and a rancher. I've been running businesses, served in my state legislature. I'm just like everybody else back in South Dakota and across this country that, you know, you watch that discussion you had earlier, it all seems so silly. And you can see very easily why it's 2 hours before the deadline and we're still arguing up here at the Capitol. We absolutely, the American people deserve better, and I hope we deliver that and that we make sure that we're responsible and we make those cuts. Because we've got to get our country back on the right track.
There were rumors earlier today that the number may come in somewhere around the $40 billion mark. If that's the case, would you vote for it, or would you feel that that's too little?
Well, you know, I would feel it's too little, but I certainly think that we absolutely need to consider any bill that Speaker Boehner has fought for, because that man has fought. He has heard our conference. He recognizes the fiscal path that we're on, and he realizes we're running out of time. You know, we're simply talking about families that we're putting them in the situation where we're going to have high inflation, devalue our dollar, our future is going to be not very stable.
If the Republicans won't hold the line on $61 billion, because I really like Paul Ryan's budget, which is $6.2 trillion, which is where the real money is. And I think there's going to be a real fight. Look, if the Democrats are out there suggesting that Republicans want to kill women and bomb innocent civilians and deny women cancer screenings over $61 billion, I can only imagine the rhetoric ratcheted up over $6.2 trillion. In that sense, in principle, isn't it important to tell the Democrats they're not going to be held hostage over this threat to shut down the government?
Yeah, I hope that every American is remembering all the rhetoric from this week and remembering how they fought to spend more money, to put more debt on this country, because in 2012, we absolutely have to win that Senate, and we have to have a president that wants to make the tough decisions and actually lead in these circumstances, and we do not have that, and that's what we need to fix this country. We absolutely need to have some leadership out of the Senate and the president, because they're holding us back, and they're doing it on the backs of our people.
Congresswoman, is there any number where if it comes in below this number in terms of actual cuts that you can no longer support the bill?
Sean, I'm looking for spending cuts and making those numbers as big as possible. So my speaker's been fighting for me. He certainly knows how I feel, and I've been pushing him, and everybody in the conference has. He has the experience. He's the negotiator, and we're going to see what he comes up with.
All right, and thank you so much, Congresswoman. Appreciate you being with us. And coming up, all eyes are on Washington, D.C. tonight as last-minute negotiations to prevent a government shutdown are now ongoing. The clock is ticking. We are now 2 hours and 30 minutes away from that shutdown. We are awaiting remarks from Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. When those happen, we'll bring them to you live right here on the Fox News Channel. Straight ahead.